Imagine standing at the gates of paradise you just inherited from your late uncle, only to discover it's been turned into a gated HOA utopia with playgrounds, roads, and smiling families who think it's theirs. The sign says, Evergreen Haven residents only. And the woman waving cars through like she owns the world? That's President Meredith Lang, the HOA Karen who's about to learn a brutal lesson. Yeah, this wasn't just a mix-up. This was theft dressed up as community spirit. 3 weeks earlier my life was the usual grind in a cramped city studio, editing wedding photos at 2 a.m., while cold coffee stared back at me. The phone rang with an unknown number, and an area code that smelled like trouble. I answered anyway. The estate attorney's voice was calm, almost apologetic. Mr. Kessler, I'm sorry to inform you your Uncle Harlan passed 2 days ago. You're the sole heir to his property, 16.5 acres and the old house out in Sunnyvale Grove. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling while he kept talking. Uncle Harlan had always been the quiet type, the guy who taught me how to frame a perfect shot when I was 10 and never once complained about the world closing in around him. No kids, no wife left, just land he'd owned since the 90s. The attorney paused, then added the line that made my stomach drop. There's a bit of a situation with the property. You'll want to see it in person before we finalize anything. I drove out the next Saturday, windows down, radio off, the route coming back to me in pieces. Old oak trees, the bend where Harlan used to slow down and point out deer. I expected the familiar gravel driveway. Instead I hit a wall of iron bars, brick pillars, security cameras, and a polished sign screaming, Evergreen Haven HOA. Private property. Residents and guests only. Behind it, fresh asphalt curved through what used to be woods. Streetlights. A playground full of laughing kids. A woman walking a golden retriever like she owned the sidewalk. My deed was in my lap, boundaries highlighted in yellow. That gate sat square on my land. I stepped out, heart hammering, and a guard in a crisp uniform stepped from the little booth. Can I help you, sir? Polite. Professional. The kind of tone that says, move along. I just inherited this property, I said, holding up the papers. I need to get to the house. He didn't even blink. This is a private HOA community, sir. You'll need board approval or a resident permit. I laughed, one of those short, bitter laughs you can't stop. I own the land your gate is sitting on. He shrugged like I told him the sky was blue. Rules are rules. Contact President Lang. She handles ownership disputes. He slid a business card through the bars. Meredith Lang, HOA President, Evergreen Haven. Her smile on the card looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror for decades. I called her first thing Monday from my studio, still smelling like yesterday's coffee. She answered on the second ring, voice syrupy sweet. Meredith Lang speaking. How may I help our newest neighbor? I explained. Inherited land. Locked gate. My uncle's name. There was the tiniest pause, paper shuffling, then the sympathy hit like cheap perfume. Oh, Ryan, I'm so sorry about Harlan. He was such a dear, quiet man. Part of our little family for years. This must be so confusing for you. Confusing is one word, I said. The gate on my deed is another. She laughed softly like I told a mildly funny joke. Evergreen Haven has been here since 2009, dear. There was a long-standing lease agreement with your uncle allowing us to develop the access roads, lighting, and amenities. The community depends on it, 200 families, children walking to the bus stop, seniors using the paths. You wouldn't want to disrupt all that, would you? I asked to see the lease. Of course, she cooed. These things are always better in person. Context matters. Come by the HOA office Thursday. We'll clear everything up over coffee. The office sat just inside the gate. Flower beds perfect. Photos of block parties on the walls like a shrine to manufactured happiness. Meredith Lang rose from her desk in a pastel cardigan and pearls, hair helmet stiff. 2 board members flanked her like bodyguards. She shook my hand like we were old friends. We're so glad you're here. Let's be reasonable adults. She slid a photocopy across the table. 99-year lease, $1 a year, signed by your uncle in 2009. Everything above board. I stared at it. I'd like the original. Her smile tightened just a fraction. Stored offsite for security. This copy is legally sufficient. One of the board guys leaned in, voice warm and fatherly. We've sunk hundreds of thousands into roads and lights. Your uncle never complained. Lived here peacefully while the neighborhood grew around him. Peacefully. The word tasted like rust. I asked about county records. Meredith's voice stayed sweet but her eyes went hard. Ryan darling, 200 families use this land every single day. Think of the children. Think of the property values. We're prepared to be generous. 800,000 cash above market, no legal mess. You walk away rich. Everyone stays happy. I let the silence stretch. Then I smiled back, the first real one in days. I'll think about it. I left with the offer ringing in my ears and the taste of bile in my throat. They weren't buying land. They were buying my silence. And something told me my Uncle Harlan had been offered the same deal years ago, and chose the fence instead. I didn't drive straight home. I sat in my car at the edge of the property watching the sun drop behind the trees, replaying every sweet little lie Meredith had wrapped around her theft. 800 grand. Enough to quit editing weddings and actually chase real photography. Enough to forget the whole mess. Most people would have taken it. I almost did. Then I remembered the way Harlan used to walk the property line with me as a kid, pointing out every boundary stake like they were sacred. He didn't talk much, but he never gave an inch. So I started digging. First stop, county recorder's office, fluorescent lights buzzing like angry bees. The clerk slid a thin folder across the counter. Original deed, clear boundaries transfer to me. No lease. No easement. Nothing. She tapped the empty page. If there was a 99-year lease properly executed, it would be recorded here. Period. Protects future owners. My pulse kicked up. I asked about surveys. She came back with another folder. HOA Commission survey from 2008, 1 year before the supposed lease. In the notes, permission pending from landowner. No signature from Harlan. Just pending. They'd drawn the roads, planned the playground, and started pouring concrete while permission was still a question mark. That night I called the only neighbor who'd been there longer than the HO, old Mrs. Delgado, 83, sharp as ever. She remembered everything. Harlan was stubborn, God rest him. They came knocking with their papers and promises. He told them flat out no. Built that 8-foot fence the next month. They built anyway. Said it was for the community good. He just withdrew. Stopped leaving the house much. Looked tired every time I saw him. I thanked her, hung up and stared at the wall. My quiet uncle hadn't been peacefully coexisting. He'd been under siege. And now the same people who wore him down were offering me a golden ticket to shut up and go away. I hired a lawyer the next day. Audrey Klein. No-nonsense property shark with a reputation for eating HOAs for breakfast. She read everything, leaned back and said the magic words. This is textbook trespass. Long-term, deliberate, profitable trespass. They don't get to keep it just because they smiled while they stole it. She drafted the demand letter. Original notarized lease or we start talking removal of improvements and damages. 48 hours later the response wasn't a document. It was an email blast to every resident in Evergreen Haven. Somehow I got copied too. Subject line. Urgent community notice. External threat to our homes. No names. Just a story about a greedy outsider trying to tear down everything we've built for our children. Meredith's fingerprints were all over the careful wording. Families could lose access to the playground where little Emma learned to swing. Seniors might not reach their evening walks safely. Think of the children. Classic Karen script. The community forum exploded before I even finished reading. Who is this guy? He wants to shut down our roads? Bet he's some city slicker who hates families. One genius posted my old social media photo from a visit years ago. Me with a camera, and captioned it, "The trespasser is back." The same photo the HOA had once used to fine Harlan for unsightly drone activity. Funny how history repeats when it's convenient. I watched the comments roll in, sipping coffee that suddenly tasted better. They were doing exactly what I hoped, panicking without proof. Because if they had the lease, they would have attached it. Instead they were weaponizing fear. A few residents started pushing back in the threads. If the lease is real, why not show it? Our fees went up 35% last year. Can we see where that money went? Threads got locked fast, but the questions were out. Cracks in the perfect HOA facade. Audrey filed for a special meeting under state statute. The board couldn't refuse. Saturday afternoon, community center packed tighter than a Black Friday sale. Folding chairs, projector screen, the whole HOA circus. Meredith Lang sat center stage like a queen on her throne, pearls gleaming under the lights, smile glued on. She opened with her favorite line. "We are a family here. Let's keep this civil for the children." I stood at the podium with my stack of evidence packets, deed, county certification, the permission pending survey, timeline printed in big friendly font so even the angriest soccer mom could follow. I didn't yell. I didn't call anyone a thief. I just laid it out like a bedtime story gone wrong. Here's the deed from 1995. Here's the survey the HOA paid for in 2008, permission pending. Here's the county saying no lease was ever recorded. So either my uncle signed something after he said no, or the board built on land they didn't own and hoped nobody would notice. Meredith's smile twitched. She stood, voice dripping honey. What Mr. Kessler is suggesting is that this board has been operating illegally for 15 years. That we somehow stole land. The truth is simpler, your uncle had an informal agreement. He lived peacefully among us. Never filed a complaint. That's consent. A guy in the third row stood up, mid-30s, dad bod, tired eyes. If the lease exists, why not bring the original today? We're all here. Show us. Meredith's cheeks went pink. It's stored securely off-site. These things take time. Another hand shot up, a woman in yoga pants. Then why were we told it was a notarized 99-year lease with development rights? The room started buzzing. Meredith tried to steer back to think of the children, but the questions kept coming like popcorn. HOA fees. Lack of audits. Decisions made behind closed doors. The perfect little kingdom was starting to look like a house of cards. I sat back down. Audrey leaned over. They're bleeding. Keep calm. Meredith called a 1-week recess to retrieve documents. The vote passed, but the room didn't cheer for her anymore. It just exhaled, uneasy. 7 days later, the second meeting felt like a funeral. Meredith's makeup couldn't hide the bags under her eyes. The board members looked like they'd aged a decade. She cleared her throat. After exhaustive search, the original lease has not been located. However, we have a photocopy and 14 years of good faith use. That's when the secretary, quiet little Mrs. Hargrove, who'd sat silently at every meeting, stood up. Hands shaking, voice barely above a whisper at first. "I can't do this anymore," Meredith hissed. "Sit down, Patricia." Mrs. Hargrove didn't sit. She looked straight at the crowd she'd helped lie to for years. "There never was a signed lease. Meredith drafted it. I typed it." Harlan Kessler refused repeatedly. He said no. We built anyway. Told ourselves it would get fixed later. Then the money was spent and it was too late. So we pretended. Gasps. Chairs scraping. Someone dropped their phone. Meredith's face went the color of old milk. "You're confused. You're emotional. I have the emails, Mrs. Hargrove said quietly. Dated. Time-stamped. Where you told me don't worry, we'll get the signature eventually. We never did. She looked at me, eyes wet. Your uncle was a good man. He just wanted to be left alone on his own land. The room detonated. Not at me, at her. How could you? We trusted you. Our houses, are they even legal? Meredith tried to speak, mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. The pearls suddenly looked ridiculous. I stood slowly. I didn't come here to destroy anyone's home. Most of you had no idea. You trusted your board. But the law says I can demand removal of every road, every light pole, every swing set. I'm not going to. Instead, here's what's fair. I laid it out simple. $150,000 in phased compensation from HOA reserves. No special assessments on residents. A new, properly notarized, Recorded 20-year lease with fair rent. Full financial audits every year. Open records. No more secret decisions. The room went quiet. Then the votes started coming in. Yes after yes. Meredith sat frozen, staring at the table like it had betrayed her. When the count finished, Donovan, the vice president, turned to her. Meredith, we accept the settlement. Effective immediately. She stood on shaky legs. I resign. For the good of the community. Her voice cracked on the last word. She gathered her clipboard like it was a shield and walked out without looking back. No one clapped. They just watched the queen leave the chessboard she'd rigged for 15 years. 3 months later, I drove back out on a quiet Saturday. The gate was open, not torn down, just open. The guard nodded instead of blocking me. I parked at the old house and walked the perimeter. Road still there. Lights still worked. Kids still laughed on the playground. But everything felt different. Nothing was happening by assumption anymore. It was happening by agreement. I fixed up the house bit by bit. Fresh paint, new windows, the stubborn wooden fence Harlan built still standing in places like a quiet monument. HOA meetings got crowded now. People actually read the financial reports. Questions flew without fear. Donovan stepped up as president and looked 10 years younger just from not having to cover for Meredith anymore. One afternoon, an envelope arrived from the estate attorney. Inside was a letter in Harlan's careful handwriting, dated months before he died. Ryan, if you're reading this, I'm gone and the land is yours. I watched them build their little kingdom on my dirt. Offered me money, called me selfish, said it was for the children. I said no every time. Built the fence so I wouldn't have to see their faces. Got tired. Got old. But I never signed. I picked you because you were the stubborn kid who never backed down when something was wrong. Don't let them decide the truth just because they speak the loudest. The land is yours now. Use it. Share it. But never live behind their fences like I did. Harlan. I folded the letter and sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, lake reflecting gold the way it must have the day he bought the place. The fight hadn't made me rich. It hadn't made me popular. But it had given me something better, proof that one quiet guy with paperwork and patience could topple an empire built on lies. Power doesn't always come with sirens and spotlights. Sometimes it shows up wearing pearls and a clipboard, smiling while it rewrites the rules. And sometimes justice doesn't arrive with cheers or viral videos. It arrives with signatures, audits, and the slow, beautiful sound of a Karen finally shutting up. So here's the question I kept asking myself the whole time. And now I'm asking you. When the HOA Karen steals your land, gaslights an entire neighborhood, and then cries, think of the children, the second she gets caught, who's really in the wrong? The guy who fought back with the truth, or the smiling neighbor who built her whole perfect life on someone else's dirt and expected everyone to thank her for it? Drop your answer below. I'm reading every single one. And if you're fighting your own HOA right now, stay stubborn. The truth is patient. But it always wins.